Hi, I'm Lindsay from Shreve Memorial Library and welcome to Art Club. This week we're going to do something a little different. I know now, lately I've been saying that every week. This week we are. Okay, so when I paint with watercolor, and this includes for Art Club, I start with a big piece of paper and I cut it down to the size that I want to paint. And a lot of artists do that. They buy big, like, poster-sized pieces of watercolor paper and cut them down because it ends up less expensive. So mine, it wouldn't make that much of a difference, but at the same time I don't really want to waste it because, you know, paper is paper and we don't want to waste it. So I thought this week it might be fun to do a little quick piece of art with a scrap of watercolor paper. So these are all cut down. This is that weird watercolor paper texture that I use every week for Art Club and only for Art Club. And these are all just little strips, like the little tiny ones I always just use to test my watercolors. But these are more substantial. So I thought it might be fun to make a bookmark out of it. And you can cut these down, like this would be a good size, but I figured this would be an excellent size for a bookmark, so I just taped it down. It's just a scrap of paper. I can test my watercolors on something else. It's just, you know, why be wasteful? My grandmother always says, waste not, want not, and I live by that. Anyway, here's what you'll need. We're gonna do a sunset, and I didn't make a traceable for this because this is just kind of like winging it, and I figured a sunset might be fun just because this is such a long strip and we can get a bunch of sky in and it'll be really pretty. But if you want to see other ideas, seriously, just go on Pinterest and search for watercolor bookmark, and you will see something similar to what I'm about to do. And you will see millions probably of examples if you scroll through long enough, because they are everywhere and they're super fun. And I mean, why be wasteful when you don't have to? Anyway, for this specific one we're doing, here's what you'll need. This is watercolor paper, whatever dimensions. These are bookmark dimensions. I didn't measure. It's about the size of the book I'm reading right now. I have watercolor. You can use any watercolor. This is just from my set. This is a red and a yellow, an orangey yellow. This is Pure Scarlet and New Gamboge. Let me make sure that Pearl Scarlet is actually the color I want to use. Oh, hey, look, it's not on here. Okay, let's use cadmium red just in case. I thought that was a different color. Okay, so this is cadmium red. You don't need to use cadmium red. You can use any red. This is New Gamboge. You can use any yellow. So we're just gonna put one at the top, one at the bottom, and mix them in the middle to create a gradient. I've also got some ink. This is black ink. Make sure you can see it. Ink is pretty much, I'm going to use it like potent black watercolor, and the main reason I'm even using it is because I don't have a straight up black watercolor in the set I'm using. I have a couple that are close, but normally I'll mix a black. But it might be fun to see what ink actually looks like when you're using it with a brush for art. If you're interested, you can use a black pen, you can use black watercolor, you can use really whatever you want. You can use really whatever you want for this whole thing, just don't use oils and put it in your book. And that includes oil pastels. Use anything else and it'll be fine. Okay, I also have a bigger brush for the gradient and a tiny brush for some trees and maybe some birds. And I'm going to put stars in it, but I don't want to spatter, and so this is another thing I don't generally use. I usually use like paint markers or something, but I thought it might be fun just to use something different. This is a white gel pen. Just your basic Jelly Roll white gel pen. I don't really use these very often. I like paint markers better, but we'll just see. And I have my little palette and I need to get some water, and let's get going. Okay, in the last couple art clubs I think I've done a wet and wet background, and that's what we're going to do today. Now I will say this like I say every time. With watercolor paper, your mileage may vary. Normally when I do wet and wet, I will use 100% cotton watercolor paper, and that is not what this is, so should be fine. So all I'm going to do, wet and wet just means wet paint on wet surface. So first I'm going to paint this whole thing with water and cover it up. I want it wet, but I do not want puddles. Nor do I want dog hairs. There we go. Okay. So it's wet. Now I'm going to get my red. Make sure you can see it. Yeah. Some red. Putting it in my little pan here. Now I'll test it on this one. Looks good. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I don't have puddles, but it is wet. I start here. Right? I'm going to just bring it down. I'm not going to get any more paint. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow, but from the bottom. And you have to do this kind of fast because you don't want it getting started. You don't want it to start to dry. There's that. Okay. So I have that. And now I'm going to go from the bottom like that. And I'm going to bring it up and blend it a little bit up with the red. And see that yellow, that orange we're getting? Lovely. So you can keep doing that as much as you want. I'm going to start up here a little bit and then bring it down just a little bit more. And look how beautiful that is. And that was ultra easy. Okay. So at this point, I am going to let this sit for a minute and dry some. And then I'm going to dry it the rest of the way with my blow dryer. You can just let it sit. Be careful if you decide to blow dry it. Make sure your paint isn't moving around anymore, because it looks like the top mine is a little bit, which is why I'm going to wait. So if you dry it, remember that watercolor dries lighter than what it looks like when it's wet. As you see, I hope you can see has happened here. And you can also see where it was pooled and I was like, oh, I should add some more. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do the same thing here, but be careful when you add the water that you add it quickly and you don't go over it a bunch of times, because it's easy to start picking up watercolor. Okay, make sure your painting is 100% dry before you do this. And get straight paint. Go back across here and down. I'm doing exactly the same thing that I did last time. Okay. And again, you have to do this again before it dries. Okay, and here's some yellow, straight paint. Come up from the bottom, meet that, and we're gonna just start blending it in a little bit. Okay? You can also, with your brush, you can drop in a little bit pure paint. Like that. And that will just make it more potent. And it has to be wet when you're doing this, like very wet. You see it's running paint together. And do this, don't do it too much. The main thing is really knowing when to stop. Okay, that looks better to me. I just wanted it to be a little bit more potent, but you see that the paper is starting to buckle even with the tape. Hopefully the tape is holding it down well enough. You can only go so far with the paper before you start having problems. So now I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. Give it a minute or so to dry a little bit, and then I'm going to dry it, and then we'll be back. So after round 2, this is dry, and I'm much happier with the colors. Remember, you can do it depending on the quality of your paper. You might be able to pull that off one more time to darken it a little bit, but try not to. The main thing was, you saw, I was just getting the paint straight out of the pan, and as much as I could with as little water as I could, since I was already painting wet on wet, to get these as vibrant as I did. Anyway, ink. Here's the thing with ink. If you get it on something, it will not come off. It just won't. Whatever it is ruined. So, watercolor, sometimes if you do it fast, depending on the quality of the watercolor, the lesser quality, the easier it will be to get out. But ink is no. So, be careful with ink. You might want to wear like an apron or something. Hopefully nothing bad will happen. Okay, so ink comes in several different forms. There's waterproof ink. This is waterproof ink. This is India ink. They make acrylic ink, make all kinds of ink. So this is for art and not like pen ink, but you can use pen ink too. So make sure you can see this. I'm going to get just a tiny bit because I don't need much, and a little ink goes a long way. So it has this dropper. I put just a tiny bit there, and that will probably do. We'll find out. Also, if you're using ink, wash your brushes quickly because this stuff dries waterproof. Just like acrylic paint. You have to be sure and wash your stuff quickly. So, here we go. So you can mix water with it. This is just pretend it's watercolor. Okay, and I'll show you what it does. Woo! Black. This will get you super duper straight up black. Okay, you can also use, again, black watercolor pens are fine. Just make sure whatever you're using is not oil based, like oil pastels or oil paint, and whatever it is black. I mean, you can use other colors. You can use whatever color you want. This is just, black. Anyway, it can also be opaque. You can use acrylic paint will work just fine, whatever you want. So here's what we're going to do. This will recall the Watercolor Galaxy if you did that one with this. All I'm going to do, I'm going to do the trees exactly like I did those. I'm going to put just a few of them on here. I'm going to do lines. This is, again, great for pens. And don't put too many on here. They'll overlap, but you don't want them overlapping that much. They don't have to be perfectly straight. You don't want them to be exactly the same height, just to make it a little interesting. So I have 5 here. Let's put 1 or 2 if you want. Okay, so there's that, and all I'm going to do is kind of start with a cone. I'm going to make pine trees and northern pine trees, and I'm just going to do that and then just kind of zigzag down them and just get bigger as I go down, and that's it. And this is just scribble as you go down with any kind of medium you're using. All of your branches should not be exactly the same. They shouldn't be the same length. You should have some sticking out because that's the way nature works. You don't want it to be perfectly symmetrical. Everything doesn't need to be straight across. You can have some weird things going on in your trees. Whatever you want. So you see how I'm just getting wider as I go down. And they will totally run into each other and overlap, and that's cool. I would like to leave a little bit of that sky behind it because I think it looks nice. But that's it, and that is up to you. So I'm just gonna finish these 5 trees. There are my trees. So at this point, you can add some other stuff if you want. Like, I guess I'm gonna add a couple birds. And remember, was it a couple weeks ago we did Van Gogh? We put a bunch of birds in there. I'm just gonna do it like that. They look like M's. So just like that. Just putting a couple. One over here. You can put as many areas as you want. Okay. And get the ink off of this brush so this brush does not end up ruined. Once again, if you do use ink, get the ink off of your brush ASAP. Okay, so next we have Jelly Roll pen. I'm going to use this for stars. Now I'm just going to check and make sure, scribble around in it, make sure. Ooh, it's picking up pink. I don't like that. That will do. Okay. I'd end up going over them a couple times. Okay, so I'm just going to put some stars in here. You can use any white pen for this. You can use a paint marker. You can use little dots of white paint. You can do it however you want. So I'm just going to put these randomly up here for stars and just kind of close to the top just to show that night is falling. You want them, some of them to be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. You don't want them all to be the same. Okay, now I'm going to make some at the top bigger. The ones at the bottom are super duper tiny. But since night is falling, the ones at the top you might be able to see better. I'm going to make all of them bigger, but I'm going to make some of them bigger. You can do this with as many or as few as you want. You can do one big star. You can do it however you want. You can do star-shaped stars. Just don't make them super duper uniform. That's all. Okay. You can put a moon up there. You can put whatever you want. I like the stars. And let's see, just this, I'm going to put a couple more down here, but they're super tiny and super light. My goal is just not to make them too symmetrical. Add comets if you want. Do it however you want. Okay, well, let's see. I'll put a few more up here. A few more light ones. Okay, that looks good to me. And there you have it. It's a bookmark. I'm going to pull this off slowly and carefully. If you're using paper, do it slowly and carefully. Woo, that's a lot of paint. Send that straight to the trash can. And pull this off. I made my margins a little bit smaller on this than I usually do. Just because it's the bookmark itself, the space is smaller. Okay. Ooh, this looks so nice. And that's a lot of paint. Trying to avoid disaster. There we go. Okay, it looks like some of my ink is still dry. I think this one I'm going to sign on the back. Don't forget to sign your painting somewhere. It's awesome because you made it. But I'm going to wait until this ink dries. And then I'm going to sign mine on the back. And I'm just going to let that dry. That'll take a minute. Isn't that lovely? This will look so nice in my books once it is completely dry. I'm super happy with that. I think it looks fantastic. You can find, again, so many examples of these on Pinterest. There are several that are really similar to this even. So yeah, just go scroll through or come up with your own design. Make whatever you want and stick in your book. These are also great for gifts. Anyway, if you painted along with me, please take a picture and send it into the library social media. We love to see what you do. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this art club, and I will see you next week and we will make more art. Bye.